say. I was sort of raised up when I came back into indigenous culture in the Lakota way. And the Lakota people, not all the Lakota people, but many Lakota people believe that, they believed in a prophecy that a man carried that all the nations would come to their way of prayer, and that it would help the world. And as I live that path, I believe that's what I'm witnessing. So the ceremony is about purification, it's about renewal, it's about coming out with a new perspective. And I thought, maybe we could use some of these elements that we do in the Sweat Lodge in writing. And the title of the workshop is, Writing for Worldview Purification. And that workshop was created for a global healing gathering in Bali, Indonesia. And my daughter and I first started talking about it, and we were invited. Well, actually, we first invited ourselves. We said, we really, really want to come. And they said, well, everybody wants to come to Bali, what's so special about you? And all I could say was, in my heart I knew, I don't know why, I just know I need to be there. But what I could say is, well, how many North American indigenous people do you have attending your conference? And the answer was none. And one of the themes of the conference was indigenous ways of knowing. So I said, well, there's no way that I can represent all of indigenous North America or South America, the Americas, but I'm willing to bring what I can. So that made me have to sit down and say, well, what do I really know? Because as I said about my background, I wasn't raised traditionally. And so I thought, well, what I do know is one of the tools that I was given, and I don't know it completely. I think anybody would say that they can never know these ceremonies completely. They're eternal. They're ever evolving. There's only spirals of understanding and knowing. But I thought, I can definitely share a little bit about that experience, and that would be the Sweat Lodge. But what I noticed was in the dialogues that a lot of the people who come from other traditions that don't have that outlook, they can't really picture non-native people in ceremony. And so it feels, it was kind of a big leap for me to once again step out and say, well, I know that people from all walks of life can be contacted and instructed and guided by the holy people. Because I've seen it. I see it every week, for the last 15 years of my life. So I felt ready to go ahead and take that risk and say, even in the face of a lot of the people who are here from other tribes who would never open their ways to non-indigenous people or even non-tribal members. So I talked to Glenn about bringing that around, and so last year we had sweat lodges, and this year he asked me to go ahead and coordinate all of that. And so it was really a dream come true. I'm a painter, and I have this one painting of the Blue Corn Mother coming up on this escalator into this department store. And the assignment was just to juxtapose things that you don't normally see together. And so this just came up for me to do, and it has turned out to be this huge thing, and anybody who sees it is very jarred by it. But I realize that's what I think. I believe the holy beings that were there, to give those original instructions, they're still standing right here. And so part of my question to people is how will you conduct yourself if you know that the Blue Corn Mother is standing right here? How will you conduct yourself if you know that White Buffalo Calf Woman is standing right here listening to what you say and watching what you do? And I don't really mean that from from that punitive Christian way that I had. It's like, oh, shame on you, look what you think about it. But it's just, what can you do with these allies standing next to you and speaking through you and breathing you and holding you up and giving you healing? So to get back to your question, what do I see as co-creation? I'm very excited about the name of this foundation. Very, very excited about that. Because after I came and talked to women from Bali, and we began to compare notes and talk about how is it, how is it, do you speak your language? Well, I speak a little bit. And they said, yeah, I only speak a little bit too, but my grandparents speak. My parents didn't, the church came, and so, just to hear this story, the same story echoed on the other side of the planet, I'm thinking, wow. And it was so powerful for me in ways that are still hard to articulate. But this Balinese woman ended up just falling into my arms crying, and she said, yes, we have the same thing. Our children are struggling. And they have such a small chance of knowing the culture because they're ridiculed for not knowing it. And it turns them away. They don't have the heart to just stand there and be ridiculed. They feel bad. And so they turn away and they just try to find another home somewhere else. And the sense of shame that comes up is so deep and so painful that I know that's why a lot of indigenous people all around the world are, fall into alcoholism or other, just something to just shut that out, because there's nowhere to go. I can't go back. I can't go to my people because all they ever say is, how come you don't know this? How come you can't speak this? Shame on you, and then when I come out into the larger community, people will look at me, and I have black hair, I look the part, and they'll say, well, tell me about your culture. We want to know about your culture. And so it's the same dilemma on either side. And so to realize that this phenomenon is happening on the other side of the earth, to realize and to speak with people from Africa, to speak, I had a chance to go to a gathering down in Mexico, and I went down to Belize. You talk to the people, it's the same story. And I never knew that this phenomenon, and I guess, I don't really like this word, I haven't found a good substitute yet, but we'll call it colonialism, feels like it hit the planet all at the same time, everywhere. And I never knew that, because the generations are coinciding. The grandmothers in Bali are coinciding with the grandmothers here in Arizona, and for my people. And the same with the grandmothers down south. They're dying off, and the people are concerned. The ones who are holding that knowledge, they're dying. And we want them to pass it on, but then they look at their grandkids, and their grandkids have, blue hair and pierced noses, and the grandparents are thinking, I'm going to pass my most sacred knowledge to this person that I can't understand. I don't even know why they're dressed this way. They're like off with MTV, which is quite a global phenomenon. And so when I realized that, I think the first thing that happened was I realized, Native people in the Americas were not singled out for a certain kind of suffering. And that might sound sort of trivial, but there was something about that of realizing, oh, we're not really all that unique. Because sometimes we carry it very uniquely, even though we recognize, I'm Dene, and our story is that we were rounded up for the long walk and taken to a concentration camp in Fort Sumner. And then, talk to the Lakota people and their story. So we kind of are aware of, we know that happened to you, it happened over here. But we're still very isolated in our own story and our own trauma. And so when it opened up that way, and I started realizing that it was a global phenomenon, then I don't exactly know why, but it was more liberating somehow, because I kept feeling like, okay, we are all in this together on the whole planet. All indigenous peoples, and then everybody, wherever that line is, and that's a very tricky line to draw, the non-indigenous peoples. I call them, so now I have a term that I'm trying out, it's the currently tribal indigenous. So I'll try that out for a while. And what they're experiencing. So if the highest technology on the planet at this time is sustainability, right? Then who really holds this high science? And what I realize is that the people holding this high science are the currently tribal indigenous people. They have traditionally they have a bounded space, to use Viola Cordova's term. So for the Dene people, we have the 4, or some people say 7 sacred mountains. And within that space, we have a certain relationship with the plants, with the animals, with the winds, with the water, with the mountains, everything. And that tells us how to be in that space. We caretake the space takes care of us, and we know that relationship. So we can live there for thousands of years and not destroy it. And that's true of every single indigenous people on the planet, right? So they're holding this high science that everybody is, getting funded in technology to figure out. And so, that tells me that we need indigenous people to survive. But I suspect that that our futures are more bound together than that. So I feel that our priority, if we are, and yesterday, Jerry, and I don't know how to say his last name, from Hopi Nation, was talking about that covenant. And most Indigenous peoples have that covenant to be the caretaker, warrior if necessary, for the earth. So in order for us to be able to truly keep that covenant, one, we have to maybe look beyond our borders to see what's going on in other places and how the larger picture is affecting us. What I really see is I have this vision of creating an Indigenous people's global wiping of the tears ceremony. So for the Lakota people, that takes place after somebody loses a very close family member. And so they literally wipe the tears, they give you a chance to grieve, and your community holds you and says, yes, we know that this really happened to you. We know that you really lost this person and that you're devastated, and we are familiar with that kind of devastation because we've lost people too. And so we hold you and we acknowledge that, and now we're inviting you and we're praying for you to come back to the community, to attend to your life's purpose, to attend to your family, and to recommit to the future. I believe that every Indigenous culture must have some way of doing this wiping of the tears. So what I feel like I'm doing right now is trying to find those currently tribal Indigenous community members who have really done that personal work, who have really faced the atrocity of attempted genocide, really taken that fully in, and somehow have come back out the other side saying, I still believe in peace, I still believe in equality, I still believe that we have like we say, a faith that is joined together, and I want to figure out how to work for that. All of us together acknowledging that this is what we must do. We must do this to come into that right place, right mind, right heart, that can truly be open, and figure out how Indigenous people can offer what is appropriate for them to offer to the larger community at this time. I feel like part of my path is to really establish that those entities that taught my ancestors are still present. They're right here, and they're willing to teach right now. They're willing to teach someone like me who was raised completely in the city, who was raised completely apart from my culture and from Native culture in general, and that I can be reached in that way. And to come back into seed and to hear this going on, and to hear that bridging, that real commitment, sincere commitment to bridging and understanding between the peoples who have access to these teachers and culture and traditions, and the people who feel like they have lost it, really resonated with me, and I feel like my life is really committed to that. And so if we walk and we pray and we listen, we're going to come upon the inspiration for those same sounds, for those same ways, and those spirits to come and talk through us so that we have our language. And so I think seed really makes that effort. And the collection of people that come to the dialogue is just phenomenal. And when that spirit of intention, of true understanding, and coming into group mind from all different walks of life comes into the same room, there's nothing better in the world for me than to be a part of that experience, because I think that's the critical point right now.